អង្គុយចុះ
President, please be seated, and without further ado, we would like to hand over to the co-prosecutor to continue putting questions to the witness.
Mr. President, thank you very much. Mr. Chukrin, in this period, after you became a platoon commander in 1973, did you know of Chu Chek?
Response: Yes, I do, but Chu Chek was in the West Zone. He was the former chief. He was my former superior, for sure.
And did you know Song Ha Hun?
Response: No, I didn't. I do not know the person by the name Song Ha Kun.
It's probably my pronunciation. Song Ha Hun. Does that help or not?
Response: No, I don't know him.
Now, when you were appointed as a platoon commander in 1973, where was your platoon? In other words, which village, which district, or which area?
Response: It is not easy to tell you the exact location of that platoon because it would take me the whole day to tell you where we would be stationed, because during the Khmer Rouge regime, military platoon or other the section would never station in one place for longer period of time. We had to be on the move every now and then. So I can say that we, the Khmer Rouge soldiers, did not have permanent base.
Now, in 1973, did you know anything about a struggle or a disagreement in the Southwest Zone between, on the one hand, Tamok, and on the other hand, Chu Chie?
Response: Yes, I did know about this. I know that Chu Chie was arrested by Tamok at that time because everyone in the military would be informed about this, although the reason to this arrest was not known to us. I have heard of it.
So Chu Chie was arrested. Do you know what happened to him?
Response: No, I don't. It's beyond my ability to know.
After you became a platoon commander in 1973, were you fighting the Lon Nol soldiers?
Response: I don't remember all the locations where I engaged in combats, because I almost engaged in combats in all districts in Kampot. But if you asked me what I did between 1973, I can tell you that during this period of time, we were hardly or heavily bombarded by the Americans, and the airplanes would be seen dropping bombs, attacking us from the sky. Every district in Kampot would be affected by these bombs. You can see the craters of these bombs dropped during that period of time. One of the pagodas in my hometown was completely destroyed by the bombs. Some monks were also killed because of the bombs, and some of them had to join the Khmer Rouge. This is what happened during these early days, although I cannot recollect every detail of the accounts. And as I already asked for forgiveness, I may at some point talk more than or I may not fully cover the real account. And when it comes to the battlefields, I can say that it is difficult to say exactly where we would engage in particular battlefield, because every field would be a battlefield, and we would engage in each and every one of the battlefield.
Now, when you were engaging in the battlefield, in all the districts of Kampot, in combat after 1973, do I have it right that you were in combat with Lon Nol soldiers at times?
Response: yes, you do. We had to engage in such fighting with the soldiers until 1975, when the war was over.
What happened, please, to Lon Nol soldiers who were captured by military troops of the front, or the CPK?
Response: during 1973, we could not call the soldiers of the CPK. They were considered as the liberated or the soldier of the liberation. And regarding the prisoners of war, we were instructed and advised by our superiors to detain these prisoners and had them sent to the rear. I don't remember how many of whom had been arrested because it happened a very long time ago. These events happened in 1973, and during that time our people were also arrested, and those people were arrested by us.
So you know, if there was a military battle and Lon Nol soldiers were captured as part of the battle or soon after the battle, I mean, were there camps, buildings, places in the countryside where the Lon Nol soldiers were detained?
Response: I'm not aware of this. I did not see if such building or camps ever existed, or whether people could have been arrested and placed under such places.
I mean, did Lon Nol soldiers get arrested and captured, I mean, every week, every month? How often did this happen?
Response: I don't know how often they could be arrested. But I can say that it is not my knowledge that the soldiers could be arrested on a daily basis.
Did you ever speak with fellow soldiers about what happened to the Lon Nol soldiers?
No. I did not know anything about this. No group of people were arrested, or in other words, people were not arrested en masse until the 1975, April 1975. So I can say I don't know about this.
You know, when you said earlier that Chu Che was arrested, do you know if any followers of Chu Che were also arrested in 1973?
Response: I only heard in the meeting that Chu Che was arrested. That's all I know.
When did you first become aware, if at all, of any person who was an enemy of the front being killed because they were an enemy?
Response: during the wartime in 1973, I did not see frequent arrests, but these happened more frequently in 1975. On top of that, my senior leaders in the province were good people. That's why such arrests were not made, or there was no disappearance other than casualties resulted from the bombings.
For the next question, I want you to not think about Lon Nol soldiers. My question's not about Lon Nol soldiers. But it is still about the period 1973, 1974, and up to the evacuation of Kampot in 1975. Are you aware, during that period, of any enemies being killed because they were enemies?
Response. Immediately after the war was over, in Kampot province, all the Lon Nol soldiers had to disarm, and the whole city had to be evacuated. And at that time, we did not know who could have been soldiers, innocent people, or else. And as you know, the soldiers in Kampot, immediately after the war was over, we had to also be demobilized. And we had to go back to our respective unit, and the base was in charge of evacuating the people. If you would like to know more who would be in charge of the bases, then you may need to ask those people concerned instead. After the war, we were asked to implement two important tasks. First, build and...
Mr. N, forgive me. I have to keep the question in a logical sequence. You're going now to events after 1975, and I'm not asking you questions about that period. You said in your interview with the OCIJ, E3/362, English 002 68895, French 002 68902, Khmer 002 10209. You said this: the CPK carried out an inflexible policy of killing Khmer Vietnamese citizens from Hanoi. And in 1973, the CPK, fought the Viet Cong, situated on Khmer soil. Now, why did you tell the investigators that the CPK had carried out an inflexible policy of killing Khmer Vietnamese citizens from Hanoi?
A response. I think this question could have been misleading. I said the Khmer Rouge soldiers and Viet Cong were divided. That's why both the Khmer Rouge soldiers and Viet Cong engaged in fierce fightings. We did not engage in attacking Vietnamese civilians, but in Kampot province at that time, we engaged in fierce fighting with the Viet Cong soldiers.
Sorry, I need to interrupt again. My question was not about fighting the Viet Cong. My question was, and I repeat it for the second time, why did you tell the OCIJ investigators that the CPK carried out an inflexible policy of killing Khmer Vietnamese citizens from Hanoi?
Response. I think I have not talked anything about this in between 1973. The only thing I am clear is that I talked about the fighting between soldiers, Khmer Rouge soldiers, and the Viet Cong soldiers. I never said anything about the killing of Vietnamese civilians. And I told the investigators about this because I was asked to tell them in detail about the fighting between both soldiers, Khmer Rouge soldiers and the Viet Cong, and this happened in Kampot province in the vicinity of Tuk Mia and Tani districts.
Rin, I want your duty counsel to help you now, please, because I'd like you to have a look at the Khmer page with a number on the top, 002-10209. And this is the page where you tell the investigators the CPK carried out an inflexible policy of killing Khmer Vietnamese citizens from Hanoi. You mention citizens, not soldiers, killing these citizens and killing these citizens from Hanoi. So help us, please. What do you know about the CPK killing citizens from Hanoi during this period, around 1973?
The President, Mr. Witness, please hold on. National Counsel for Mr. Khieu Samphan, you may proceed. Counsel Kong Sam-on. Thank you, Mr. President. At this point in time, I feel that Mr. Co-Prosecutor is putting repetitive question, and witness already made it clear that it could have been misled when he was talking to the co-investigators. Mr. Witness already indicated that there was no Vietnamese citizens from Hanoi who lived in Kampot could have been killed, attacked by the Khmer Rouge soldiers.
Mr. President, simple questions, simple answers. Can I please proceed?
The President, yes, you may.
Mr. Chuprin, when you spoke to the investigators back in 2008, there was an audio recording made of what you said. Now, if any of the defence counsel want to listen to the tapes of what you said and then say that it's been misinterpreted, they can do that. But this is a record of what you said to the investigators. So I want you to try and pause and think things through and help us, please. What did you know about, if anything? What did you know about Vietnamese citizens from Hanoi being killed by the CPK around 1973?
Response. I think I got your question now. Previously, I couldn't understand it. Your question is about the Khmer citizens who studied or who went to Hanoi, and I don't remember when they went there because perhaps I was not yet born. It could have been during the Khmer Isarak regime, but later on they returned to the country, and during 1973 these people were the target for arrests. I don't know how many people were arrested, but in Kampot province alone, I could say that these people who went to Vietnam during Isarak time returned home at a later date were arrested, and they were regarded as the Khmer Hanoi citizens. And again, I don't remember how many people were arrested, but the arrest did happen. You also may conduct further investigation into this matter, and there are some documents relevant to this, I believe, a thing that happened in Kampot at that time. And these Khmer citizens who came or returned from Hanoi or became members in the Khmer Rouge, and some still lived through the state of Cambodia, Mia Kruj and Mia Sambat, who were believed to be two of these people who have returned from Hanoi, but the rest perhaps have all disappeared, and it is true. And I heard through the rendition that you asked about the Vietnamese people. Indeed, it did not happen to the Vietnamese people, but it happened to the Cambodian people who studied or who went to Hanoi and returned to Cambodia and then been arrested. So I hope I have answered this question, and but I don't think there could have been many people from Hanoi who were arrested at that time. Not many of them.
Now, were these Khmer Vietnamese citizens coming back to Cambodia? I mean, were they arrested because they were friends? Were they arrested because they were enemies? Or can you help us why they would be arrested by the CPK?
Response. I'm afraid I don't know the reason behind this. It's beyond my knowledge.
Thank you. You said, and I've already put this to you, but you're using the word arrest. But in this interview, you told the investigators about a policy of killing. So what, if anything, did you know about killing these people?
As I said earlier, I said that what interested me was what happened in the military. The chamber may have understood that after the end of the war, all soldiers could not come back to their village or commune. They had to stay at their position. They were not allowed to come back to the area bases. If they came back, they were not given even rice to eat. That was what happened at that time. If they came to visit their parents, they were not given any rice to eat. So when you asked me about that, I could not give detailed description.
Thank you. I'm going to ask some questions now about artillery. In other words, soldiers who shoot guns, big guns. Now, in your OCIJ interview, you said that it was in May 1975 when you became a commander of Artillery Battalion 59. Now, were you involved with artillery in 1973 and 1974? Or did you just become involved in artillery in 1975?
Sorry, during the war, during the fighting, the Khmer Rouge soldier did not have 105 millimeter big guns. We had that from the American only after the war. There were around 9 or 10 big guns, artillery at Cambodia. So this was after the war. The artillery unit was created after the war. The training, we did not know how to operate those heavy artillery. Our skills were limited, in fact.
Thank you for that answer. I want you to see if you can help us with what was actually going on in Kampot in 1973 through 1974. Now, I don't know, were the Lon Nol soldiers mainly in control of Kampot? Was the front soldiers mainly in control of Kampot? Or did the control of Kampot change between Lon Nol and the front?
In 1973 and 74, many districts were controlled by the Liberation Army from Cap City, from the and north of the cement factory. Kampong Trai, Tukmir district were controlled by the Khmer Rouge. There was no Lon Nol soldiers over there.
Right. Can I put the question this way then? Do you ever remember Liberation Army soldiers attacking Kampot?
What do you mean? I do not understand the question.
Was there a time when Lon Nol soldiers were in Kampot with the civilian population of Kampot, and the Liberation Army wants to take over Kampot to fight the Lon Nol soldiers? Do you remember that?
I know only about the final fighting on the 16th of April, one day before the fall of Phnom Penh. That was the decisive battle. And there were sporadic fightings, ambush, but I could not remember all those small-scale fighting. At that time, there were a lot of operations in the countryside, and I could not remember the year.
Try and help you by rephrasing the question or coming at it from a different angle. You said in answer to one of my earlier questions that from 1973 to 1975, you were in combat in all the districts around Kampot. So in 1973 and 1974, was the Liberation Army in control of Kampot?
No. The town was not controlled by us.
Who was it controlled by then, if it wasn't controlled by you?
Lunal soldiers.
When the non-Lol soldiers were in charge of Kampot, was the Liberation Army happy about that? Or did they want the Lon Nol soldiers out of Kampot?
When you ask about the fighting, it is easy to answer. Of course, in war, we want to defeat our enemy. So, of course, we are not happy. We have to send the forces to defeat our enemy. And when you ask me whether we are happy, and of course, when we receive the order to fight, we have to fight. So this is the competition between one armed group and the other. So there was no peace when the fighting occurred. At the time, the Khmer Rouge never talked about negotiation to stop the fighting. They just focused on the fighting.
Now, you said earlier in some very clear examples or answers that the Liberation Army considered people who lived in the cities to be enemies. So you know when you were fighting the Lon Nol soldiers in Kampot, did your superiors ever give you any orders about what you were to do with the city dwellers in Kampot if you found them?
At that time, my superior told me to be careful not to target the people's location. We have to be careful. So this is the order or the advice from our superior. And my superiors have passed away already. They ordered us not to hit civilians' target. We do not target civilians, we are careful, in fact.
You used the phrase target civilians or hit civilians. I mean, was the Liberation Front using any mortars, shoulder-held, rocket-propelled grenades? Or, to your knowledge, was there any way that the CPK could have been shelling, is the English word, shelling Kampot in 1974?
At that time, we had only 120 millimeter, 80 millimeter artillery and B-40 rockets. We did not have many heavy weapons. It was not like the situation right now. You asked me about what happened long time ago, so I could not recall completely.
Well, you've confirmed that the Liberation Army had artillery near Kampot. Now, are you aware or not of the Liberation Army shelling the city of Kampot in March and April 1974 and killing civilians?
I would like to say that that is not true, because the Khmer soldier at the time did not have many kinds of weapons, and we saved our ammunition. We did not waste the ammunition. It was very different from Lunar soldier. Lunar soldier could fire because they had the assistance from the Americans. For us, we did not do like that. So I would like to say this is not true. We saved our ammunition. We fired. Only we were certain that that was the military base. We did not have any assistance from the other. We could only capture the ammunition from the Lunar army. So the shelling or firing hundreds of shells into the city was not true, because we had only a few numbers of artillery.
Thank you. Are you, or were you ever aware, or do you want to say anything about, in March and April 1974, about 8,000 people fleeing Kampot as refugees?
I could not grasp that. This is beyond my capacity. I do not know about their flight or about the number of people fleeing. This is beyond my ability, because I was only a low-ranking soldier. I knew only about the fighting that you had just asked. The president, co-prosecutor, you should proceed. You should move forward, because your question seems to be too slow. Your question seems to be out of the scope of the case. The scope was about the force transfer, phase 1 and phase 2. If it was beyond this, you can ask only about the history of the CPK. So the witness know only about the communication and structure of the military. So do not put the question that have little relevance to the scope of the case.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to make a respectful submission directly and immediately to what you've just said. Every criminal charge has a context. Every criminal charge has a background, and every.
The President, you should continue with the question. You should not ask such a question. This is the ruling. You have requested the time to put question, but the chamber does not need to listen to the question which are quite far from the scope of the case.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Chukrin, I'd like to ask you now about the evacuation of Camp Hock. And I'm going to put to you an extract from what you said to the OCIJ. E3/362, English 0026 8896, French 0026 8904, and Khmer 0021 0210. You were asked this question. Would you please tell us more about the evacuation of people from Kampot town? From whom did you receive such orders, and when? And you said this. The army convened a meeting to talk about how to topple Lon Nol's regime and the plan to evacuate people. The meeting about the evacuation was held about 1 month prior to the fall of Phnom Penh. The order was given to force all people to leave all the cities and towns. This meeting was held in Phnom Thar, where Kampot's military command headquarters was located. Sek, the Chief of Staff, chaired the meeting. Tamok, who was also present at the meeting, said, "It is not necessary to have markets or cities. All people must be evacuated to the rural areas in order to build the rural economy." Tamok did not say who had made the decision on this matter, but the evacuation of the people from the cities was made for the entire country and was to take only 2 days. The first question, is that correct?
The President, witness, please hold on. The International Council for Mr. Nunjia, you can proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. I object to this question. Prosecutor is leading the witness.
It's a matter for you, Mr. President. This is an extract from a previous OCIJ interview, and it's obviously against a background now of Mr. Chukrin having answered questions, I think, all afternoon, which is in contrast to his attitude this morning.
Well, the President, thank you. Council Vikakupe, this is not appropriate because we have done many times already. If we quote the extract from the statement made by the witness, that kind of practice is not regarded as leading question. We have decided on this practice many times already.
So, I mean, how many military people were at this meeting in about March 1975, just roughly?
I do not remember the exact number. I cannot make the estimation. I do not know about the number.
Now, you said that the army convened the meeting to talk about how to topple Lon Nol's regime and the plan to evacuate the people. So, do you know when the plan to evacuate the people had been decided upon?
After the army get into the city, all the people were told to leave. That was on the 16th of April. Soldier told all the people to leave the city. The city was quiet. No one was over there.
And when you say that Tamok was saying it's not necessary to have markets or cities, and all people must be evacuated to the rural areas in order to build the rural economy, I mean, was that the first time you'd heard Tamok say something like this? Or had he said this before?
That was the first time I heard. Before the end of the war, currency, Khmer currency was printed, and then the currency disappeared. And of course, after the war, there were no markets, there were no city, and this was like what he said.
And when Tamok was saying the evacuation of the people from the city was made for the entire country, did he say anything about the other parts of the country? In other words, not Kampot or the southwest. Did he say anything what the plan was for other parts of the country?
He only talked about the province. That was true. He talked only about the province, Kampot province. But of course, that practice was done throughout the whole country, and I believe that there was the agreement from the leaders.
I just want to be clear. I mean, prior to this meeting in March 1975, had you attended any other meeting where the evacuations of towns or cities was discussed?
No. The meeting was not held many times.
And what instructions were you given at this meeting about, I mean, how was the evacuation of Kampot to take place? What orders did you get as to how the soldiers were to be used to evacuate Kampot?
We order the people to leave the city, and that's all. That was the order.
And so what happened then on the day of the evacuation? What happened to the city dwellers in Kampot?
Soldier requested them to leave, and they arranged their belongings, and then they went away along the roads. And the town was quiet. And they left the city.
And did the soldiers have guns with them when they were escorting the civilians out of the city, or not?
After the evacuation of the people, the soldiers were not over there. That was the role, that was the responsibility of the others, as I said. As I have told you already. After the evacuation, others were responsible for the work over there. It was not the responsibility of the soldier and the army anymore.
I was just asking if on the day that when people were evacuated, the soldiers were armed. I mean, were they armed or were they not armed?
Response. These soldiers did not mingle in the population, and they had nothing to engage in the business of civilians, at least to the best of my recollection.
Did you receive any instructions on what you were to do if civilians didn't want to leave Kampot?
Response. No, there was no such instruction. And there was a request that all people had to leave the city, and everyone had to leave. No one opposed this. And soldiers had to station at their respective units or section.
What arrangements had been made outside of the city for these people? Where were they going to live? What was going to happen to them?
Response. As I already mentioned, it was not the competence of the soldiers. It was the sole responsibility of those who were in charge of civilian management, the management of civilian or population, and it had nothing to do with the soldiers. We soldiers had to move to our respective unit to do some farming, to make sure that we would be self-sufficient. And I do not know much about what happened at the rear, because we were fully engaged in the front battlefield instead.
And on this occasion, when you were engaged in the front battlefield, what happened to Lon Nol soldiers who were captured at Kampot at this time?
Response. As I mentioned, immediately after the war was over, we found it difficult to identify who would be who, because everyone already was disarmed and or surrendered their weapons, and we couldn't say exactly who would be soldier. They all were like civilians.
Mr. President, I can just see the time. I have a few questions left on this theme. I anticipate that they would take another 10 minutes just to finish off this topic, and then that will in fact conclude the questions from the prosecution. So, Mr. President, I'm in your hands as to whether you would wish me to continue at this time or whether to adjourn and to continue tomorrow.
The President, it is now appropriate time already for the adjournment, and for the time you would like to use to put more questions, you may make use of the time allotted to the lead co-lawyers for the civil parties, because you had used most of the time putting some questions that were not relevant. The court is now, the session is adjourned today, and tomorrow's sessions will be resumed at 9 a.m. tomorrow, and the questions will be put by lead co-lawyers for the civil party for 1 hour during tomorrow's morning session, and the remaining time or floor will be given to counsels for the defense. And Mr. Witness, you are also invited to appear before the chamber again tomorrow at 9 a.m. Court officer is now instructed to assist with Besu and also the security personnel of prison to make sure that Mr. Chukran can be returned to the prison and have him returned to the courtroom by tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. We also instruct people concerned to assist this operation so that he can be returned to the courtroom accordingly. And jury counsel for Mr. Chukrin is also asked to return to the courtroom to assist him for tomorrow's session. Westu unit is now instructed to bring a result witness TCW 126 awaiting call for testimony if needs be. And security personnel are now instructed to bring Mr. Kyusampon and Noon Jie back to the detention facility and have them returned to the courtroom by tomorrow at 9 a.m. Mr. Noon Jie is instructed to be returned to his holding cell where he can observe the proceedings from there through audio-visual link. The court is adjourned.